So I think it's important for people to understand that when we experience an intimate harm or an intimate hurt, for many people, that's a first-time experience, or it's an experience they don't quite know how to cope with or deal with. And when I work with somebody who suffered a child abuse, a sexual assault, a domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, we try to help that person understand that pretty much your whole life experience you've been what I call a ripple person. And now all of a sudden you find yourself being a where the rock hit the water person. And so if you can imagine a pond with calm water and a rock hits that water, the water behaves very differently where the rock hit it. And from where the rock hit it, the ripples go out. And so if you know somebody who has suffered an intimate harm, you are a ripple person. It doesn't matter how close you are to that person, you're suffering from a ripple of that, the ripple effect from them being harmed. And our entire life experience is mostly, we start out as ripple people. And when a ripple person finds out somebody close to them or an instinctive support or a loved one, it becomes where the rock hits the water or they're the victim of an intimate crime or an intimate harm. If we're not careful, we're going to respond to that person as a ripple person. What we find is there's very different needs. Ripple people have serious, legitimate needs, but oftentimes they're very different than where the rock hit the water person. So what we find is the ripple person, say for instance, a daughter gets abused or physically harmed or hurt by an intimate partner. And so that daughter is going to call an instinctive support, a family member, a close friend, a work associate, and they're going to confide in them what just happened. Well, that person now just became a ripple person. And if we're not careful, we're going to give advice. And that advice is going to be call the police. It could be leave them now. I'm coming to get you. We need to do something now. It's been my experience in 31 years of doing these kinds of investigations and cases and working with survivors of these types of things. That's not always satisfying the need of where the rock hit the water person. And it's very hard to understand a person who is in that need at that moment. Many times being accurate is not what's necessary. And if we're not careful, we'll give them accurate answers. And many of the people we work with who have survived these types of circumstances, they will tell us that that tends to isolate them more. Another problem with that is if it's the first time you've suffered an intimate harm, you'll start applying ripple person logic to yourself. Well, you're not a ripple person anymore. You're a where the rock hit the water person. And then you'll start wondering what's wrong with you because you can't even talk yourself through what's happening to you. So those are very critical things. Many times, from what we've learned and our personal experience has shown us, if we are where the rock hit the water person, we don't need to have accurate information thrust upon us. We need to hear things like, what do you need right now? If I were in your position, I would feel the same way. How tired are you? It's okay to feel the way you feel. There's nothing wrong with you. Your circumstance is wrong. Most of the time, people don't need to hear, call the police, leave him now. I told you this would happen. I've told you what to do before. You never take my advice. What's wrong with you? And even if you don't use those words, oftentimes that's how they're heard. And so the needs of a ripple person are very important, but they're very different from a rock hit the water person. And there are ways and there are supports and there are places you can go who understand that. One of the biggest pieces of advice I give, and it sounds a little counterintuitive, but about everything you do when you're working with a person who's suffering from intimate harm is counterintuitive. I think it's best to talk to a perfect stranger about intimate harm in order to get support initially. And the reason I say that, and I base this on 31 years of experience and personal experience, is that a perfect stranger, once they hear you've been harmed intimately, they're a ripple person, but they're way, way, way out in the concentric rings, and they don't get much of the pain and the suffering on them because they don't know you. And they're more apt to be able to be more objective and non-emotional, and they're able to maybe see what you need because their needs aren't as critical. For instance, if you were telling a father or a mother or a best friend, they're right next to where the rock hit the water. So they're suffering pain, they're suffering turmoil. And it's hard to be kind of objective. It's hard to put that person's needs in front of your own, because ripple people have needs. And a lot of times, as a ripple person, if I give advice to a where the rock hit the water person, I'm really trying to help myself satisfy my pain. And sometimes that can be harmful to a rock hit the water person. It's well-meaning, I understand that, it's given from love, but it's also an effort so I feel better. If my daughter called me and told me her intimate partner had harmed her in some way, I'm going to have pain. I'm going to have suffering from that. And I'm going to try everything I can to make her better so I feel better. That's always not the best position to be in if you're offering support to somebody. I hope that makes sense. I'm always open for questioning and comments for that. I'm always able to sit down. My organization, don'thit.org, we have designed and implemented a very step-by-step comprehensive plan based on 30 plus years of doing these things. We've seen what works, we've seen what doesn't work, and most importantly, we've seen what causes harm. And our motto is do no harm. But first you have to understand what harm is, not specifically to ripple people and not specifically to where the rock hit the water people. Harm is harm. And understanding those dynamics, we can help people recover from the suffering they're in way faster than we can without.